For half a century, Ron Howard has been the very embodiment of the American dream. A face so familiar, so universally cherished, that he almost feels like a member of our own families. We watched him grow up on our television screens, first as the eternally optimistic Opie Taylor in the idyllic black and white world of Mayberry, then transforming into the earnest, big-hearted Richie Cunningham, navigating the rock and roll rebellion of the 1950s. His boyish charm, his disarming smile, and his consistent good guy persona were more than just acting. They became an integral part of the collective American consciousness. And then, without missing a beat, he seamlessly transitioned behind the camera, evolving into a two-time Academy Award-winning director, delivering cinematic masterpieces like Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, and Rush. He collected accolades, respect, and a seemingly impenetrable aura of contentment and success, a man who truly had it all. But what if that gleaming facade, that carefully cultivated image of unwavering success and serenity, masked a much darker, far more turbulent reality? What if the life we perceived as perfect, one built on talent, hard work, and wholesome values, was, in truth, a relentless tightrope walk over personal abysses, filled with agonizing choices and silent battles? Just a moment ago, it seems, the veil was finally lifted. In a candid, soul-bearing conversation that has sent genuine shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond, Ron Howard himself, the man we thought we knew, has begun to peel back the layers. He didn't just share anecdotes, he confessed to profound personal struggles, devastating choices, and moments of utter despair that remained locked away for decades, hidden behind that ever-present reassuring smile. For years, the public narrative of Ron Howard's life was a masterclass in linear, upward trajectory. Child star to teen idol to revered filmmaker, all while maintaining a remarkably stable family life. We celebrated his victories on the big screen, marveled at his longevity, and quietly admired the seemingly effortless way he navigated one of the most cutthroat industries in the world without a hint of scandal or personal meltdown. Yet, beneath that polished exterior, behind that familiar, comforting expression, a different story was unfolding. A narrative woven with threads of agonizing regret, the quiet desperation of battling addiction within his closest circle, and the chilling reality of his own body giving out under immense pressure. It's a story that reveals the true, often brutal cost of chasing extraordinary ambition while attempting to maintain a picture-perfect public persona. Perhaps the most gut-wrenching of these revelations centers around a devastating choice he made in 1991, a decision, he now admits, that continues to haunt him to this very day, a phantom limb of regret that he carries with him every single morning. He describes it not as a professional misstep or a business deal gone sour, but as something far more intimate, far more human. It was a critical crossroads in his personal life, a moment where the path he ultimately took, for all its apparent necessity and logic at the time, left an indelible scar. This choice, made with the weight of his growing career and personal obligations pressing down, reshaped fundamental relationships and ignited a profound sense of loss that has, he confides, never truly healed. A deep ache that persisted even as his professional star continued to rise to new heights. He speaks with a raw vulnerability about the excruciating internal debate that preceded it, the sleepless nights spent wrestling with impossible options, and the eventual, reluctant commitment to a course of action that he instinctively knew would carry a heavy, lifelong price. He recalls the feeling of knowing, even as he was making the decision, that he was walking away from something irreplaceable, sacrificing a piece of his own happiness and the happiness of others for what seemed, in the grand scheme of his life at that moment, an unavoidable necessity. The memory of that exact period, he says, is tinged with a specific kind of melancholy, a sense of opportunity lost forever, A turning point that, while enabling his future successes, also carved a deep canyon of personal sorrow. Then there's the heartbreaking account of a beloved family member's harrowing struggle with addiction. While Ron was basking in the glow of critical acclaim, standing on glittering award stages and accepting prestigious trophies for his directorial prowess, a relentless, destructive storm was brewing much closer to home. He detailed the relentless worry, the agonizing helplessness that pervades a family when addiction takes hold, and the desperate, often clandestine attempts to provide support, intervention, and solace, all while maintaining a public facade of unwavering strength and control. He speaks of the private phone calls made from quiet corners of bustling film sets, the whispered conversations in the dead of night, and the constant tightrope walk between the immense demands of a high-pressure, high-profile career and the crushing, all-consuming fear of losing someone he deeply cherished to the insidious grip of substance abuse. The weight of that secret, he described, was almost unbearable, a constant, low hum of anxiety reverberating beneath the surface of his outward calm, impacting his focus, his peace of mind, and his ability to fully enjoy even his greatest professional triumphs. He reveals the insidious way the disease infiltrates every aspect of family life, demanding sacrifices, inflicting pain, and testing the limits of love and resilience. The profound fear, the cycles of hope and despair, and the quiet heroism of family members grappling with a force far beyond their control paint a picture starkly at odds with the celebratory headlines about his latest box office hit or critical darling. This wasn't just a challenge, it was an existential threat to the very fabric of his personal world. And finally, the shocking confession of a specific, harrowing moment on a film set when his own body, pushed beyond its absolute limits, simply gave out completely. We, the audience, often see the glamorous red carpet premieres, the triumphant acceptance speeches, and the polished final products on screen. But rarely do we glimpse the brutal, relentless grind, the physical and mental exhaustion that fuels such monumental cinematic achievements. Ron recounted a specific, harrowing day during a particularly intense production, where the pressures of directing a multi-million-dollar film, managing hundreds of crew members, battling tight deadlines, and contending with his unaddressed personal demons all culminated in a profound physical collapse. This wasn't just typical exhaustion. This was a complete system failure, a stark, terrifying reminder that even the most successful, seemingly invincible individuals are ultimately fragile, human beings with finite reserves. This critical breakdown forced him to confront his own mortality, the unsustainable pace he had maintained for decades, and the deep-seated belief that he always had to be the one holding everything together. It resulted, he vaguely terms, in those missing months from his memory, a period shrouded in a fog of recovery, profound self-reflection, and a desperate search for balance in a life that had become entirely unbalanced. This experience fundamentally altered his perspective, revealing the urgent necessity of prioritizing his own well-being over the relentless demands of a career that had for so long consumed him entirely. This isn't merely a celebrity interview or a collection of anecdotes. It's a raw, unfiltered look into the human cost of extraordinary success and the profound sacrifices made in pursuit of a dream. We will delve deep into these untold stories, piecing together the true narrative of a man who built an empire while grappling with deeply personal demons that remained hidden from public view. Prepare to see Ron Howard not just as the acclaimed director or the beloved actor, but as a complex, vulnerable human being whose journey is far more intricate and far more heartbreaking than any script he has ever brought to the screen. Stay with us as we uncover the true price of perfection and the devastating details he just revealed. For 5 decades, the name Ron Howard has been synonymous with a particular brand of American idealism. He emerged into the national consciousness not as a troubled teen idol or a rebellious counterculture icon, but as the quintessential boy next door, a perpetually good-natured presence who seemed to embody the very best of an idealized vision of America. His journey from the dusty, charming streets of Mayberry to the bustling, complex sound stages of Hollywood unfolded before the public eye, a narrative arc that seemed almost too perfect to be true. From his earliest days, people didn't just see a young actor. They saw a reflection of their own hopes for a simpler, purer existence, a testament to enduring values that felt increasingly rare in a rapidly changing world. It began, of course, with the iconic role of Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. Imagine for a moment a young boy with bright red hair, a freckled nose, and an earnest gaze, navigating the gentle life of a North Carolina town. Opie was more than just a character. He was the symbol of an innocent American childhood, a child who always learned the right lesson, who was guided by a wise and loving father, and who never seemed to stray too far from the path of decency. Every week, millions of families gathered around their televisions, escaping into the comforting rhythms of Mayberry. And in Opie, they found a character they could trust, a figure who represented the unblemished potential of youth. He was the son every parent wished for, the friend every child deserved. This image, cultivated over 8 seasons and 200 episodes, became etched into the collective American psyche. It wasn't just a role, it was an identity, a foundation built on wholesome goodness that would follow Ron Howard for the rest of his life, both a profound blessing and, as we'll explore, an immense burden. As the 1970s dawned, television audiences found Ron Howard again, this time transforming from the rural charm of Mayberry to the nostalgic glow of 1950s Milwaukee as Richie Cunningham in Happy Days. Here he was, slightly older, but still embodying that unmistakable all-American spirit. Richie was the loyal friend, the earnest suitor, the good student, and the rock-solid core of his family. He navigated teenage rites of passage with an admirable blend of humor and integrity, always doing his best to make the right choices, even when faced with the irresistible allure of Fonzie's cool rebellion. He was the relatable everyman, the teenager who felt real and approachable, a stark contrast to some of the more tumultuous or angst-ridden portrayals of youth emerging in popular culture at the time. The transition was seamless in the public's mind. Opie had grown up, and he was still the same fundamentally decent person, just with a slightly slicker haircut and a love for rock and roll. The public's affection only deepened, solidifying his image as the wholesome, trustworthy individual who seemed incapable of a misstep. This meticulously maintained public persona wasn't necessarily a conscious construction of Ron Howard's own design in his early years. Rather, it was an organic outgrowth of the characters he played. Characters that were so powerfully written and universally beloved that they simply merged with the public perception of the actor portraying them. The careful crafting came from the industry and the media's embrace of this narrative. In a world increasingly saturated with stories of child stars falling from grace or Hollywood personalities succumbing to the pressures of fame, Ron Howard stood out as an anomaly. He was the one who seemed immune to scandal, untouched by the darker undercurrents of show business. This made him a marketing dream, a safe bet for studios, and a reassuring presence for audiences. Every interview, every public appearance, every carefully chosen project reinforced this image of reliability and good character. He rarely courted controversy, he rarely gave dramatic tell-all interviews, and he remained steadfastly married to his high school sweetheart Cheryl, presenting a picture of domestic stability that further cemented his wholesome appeal. The societal expectations placed upon him as both Opie and Richie Cunningham were truly immense, bordering on the impossible for any human being. People didn't just enjoy his performances, they projected their ideals onto him. He became a living embodiment of the virtues his characters represented: innocence, loyalty, honesty, and a solid moral compass. There was an unspoken expectation that Ron Howard, the man, would continue to live up to the unblemished ideals of Opie and Richie Cunningham. He was expected to remain the picture of a stable, unproblematic individual, someone who would never disappoint, someone who would always make the good choice. This expectation created a curious paradox. While it undoubtedly opened doors for him in an industry often wary of perceived risks, it also created a suffocating environment, leaving very little room for the complexities, vulnerabilities, and very real human struggles that are inherent in every single person's life. This perception, then, became both a tremendous blessing and an undeniable burden. The blessing was tangible: the immediate trust he commanded from audiences and industry executives alike. When Ron Howard transitioned from acting to directing in the late 1970s and early 1980s, an incredibly difficult leap for many actors, his established image paved a smoother path. His early directorial efforts, like the zany comedy Grand Theft Auto in 1977, or the critically acclaimed Night Shift in 1982, were received with an inherent goodwill. By the time he directed Splash in 1984 and Cocoon in 1985, two hugely successful films that blended fantasy, humor, and heartwarming themes, his directorial career was firmly established. His name on a project signaled not just quality, but also a certain ethos, a film that would likely be entertaining, uplifting, and generally suitable for a wide audience. He was seen as a safe pair of hands, a director who understood mainstream appeal and knew how to deliver it with skill and sincerity. This allowed him to build a prolific and respected career, creating beloved films like Parenthood, Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, and The Da Vinci Code, all under the umbrella of that trusted, wholesome brand. However, beneath the surface of this remarkable success and unwavering public adoration lay the profound burden of maintaining such an exacting image. Imagine the pressure of feeling like you constantly have to live up to an idealized version of yourself, a version created by fictional characters and public perception, rather than the messy reality of genuine human experience. For Ron Howard, this meant a constant, often unconscious vigilance. He had to be careful with his words, cautious with his choices, always aware that any deviation from his established image could be met with disappointment, confusion, or even outright criticism. The media, for its part, was often quick to laud him for his normalcy, reinforcing the idea that he was extraordinary precisely because he wasn't caught up in the typical Hollywood excesses. While this praise might have been well-intentioned, it inadvertently boxed him in, creating a psychological straitjacket. The psychological toll of upholding this image would have been immense. How does one grapple with personal doubts, anxieties, or moments of weakness when the entire world expects you to be a beacon of stability and wholesomeness? How do you explore difficult emotions or make challenging, imperfect choices when you're the guy who always seems to do the right thing? This kind of internal conflict can be isolating, forcing individuals to compartmentalize their lives, presenting one flawless facade to the public while grappling with unseen emotional complexities behind closed doors. For Ron Howard, the man, the chasm between the Hollywood royalty seen on screen and the private individual began to widen. It wasn't an abrupt leap-in, it was a gradual, almost imperceptible divergence. The public image was a beautifully crafted, impeccably polished suit of armor, but inside, the man was beginning to feel the weight of its perfection. Even as his professional life soared, marked by critical acclaim and commercial success, his personal life, like anyone else's, would have its own intricate tapestry of challenges and triumphs. The expectation of perfection, however, cast a long shadow over these private moments. While the world saw the accomplished director accepting awards and producing hit films, there were moments, experiences, and decisions unfolding away from the public eye that would test him in ways that Opie Taylor and Richie Cunningham never could have imagined. These were the moments where the carefully constructed public persona offered little comfort or guidance, where the all-American boy facade could not protect against the very real and often heartbreaking complexities of family, personal growth, and the quiet battles waged within oneself. The world saw the smile, the steady gaze, the confident demeanor of a man in control, but what it didn't see was the increasing internal pressure, the subtle shifts in his personal landscape, and the emotional weight accumulating as the public narrative continued its trajectory of unblemished success, unknowingly creating a growing distance from the true, unfiltered story of Ron Howard's life behind the scenes. The man who seemed to have it all, and who presented himself as having it all with such grace, was, like anyone, navigating his own quiet storms. And the biggest challenge might have been finding a way to do so without shattering the very image that had defined him for so long. By 1991, Ron Howard was not merely a recognizable face from television screens. He had successfully transitioned into one of Hollywood's most respected and sought-after directors. His journey from Opie Taylor, the innocent, freckle-faced boy from Mayberry, to Richie Cunningham, the earnest teenager navigating the complexities of the 1950s, had laid a wholesome foundation for his public image. But behind that familiar, friendly smile, away from the adoring fan mail and the glow of the awards season, a storm was brewing. It was a year that would present him with a choice so profoundly agonizing, its repercussions would ripple through the fabric of his life for decades, casting a long, unyielding shadow over even his most triumphant moments. The late 1980s had been a period of significant ascent for Howard as a director. Splash in 1984 had proven his commercial viability. Cocoon in 1985 showcased his ability to handle nuanced, character-driven narratives with a touch of magic. And Parenthood in 1989 cemented his reputation as a master of ensemble comedy drama, capable of coaxing authentic performances from a star-studded cast. He had achieved what many child actors only dreamed of, a second act, a powerful and prestigious reinvention that commanded respect in an industry notorious for its fleeting loyalties. Studios trusted him. Actors wanted to work with him. The future, from an outside perspective, looked incredibly bright and utterly unburdened. Then came the script, a sprawling, ambitious project, unlike anything he had tackled before. It was a historical drama, an epic that promised not just box office success, but serious critical acclaim. A film that could truly define his standing as a major auteur. The proposal landed on his desk in early 1991, thick with historical research and a narrative scope that dwarfed his previous works. It was the kind of project that directors spent their entire careers dreaming of, a chance to paint on the grandest cinematic canvas. The studio was eager, offering him a significant budget, creative control, and the promise of a top-tier cast. This wasn't just another movie. It was a professional coronation, an undeniable leap forward into the ranks of the industry's elite. He could almost feel the weight of the Oscar statuette in his hand as he turned the pages. The offer was dazzling, almost intoxicating in its potential. He saw the complex set pieces, the period costumes, the sweeping landscapes, all unfolding in his mind's eye. Yet, as the excitement of this monumental opportunity swirled around him, a different, far more insidious current was dragging at his heart. Simultaneously, closer to home, a devastating personal crisis was escalating. A beloved family member, whom he adored and had always felt a deep protective connection to, was spiraling deeper into the relentless grip of addiction. This wasn't a sudden onset. It had been a creeping shadow for years, a persistent worry that he and his wife, Cheryl, had tried to address with increasing urgency. But by early 1991, the situation had reached a critical, life-threatening precipice. The phone calls grew more desperate, the reports from other family members more alarming, painting a grim picture of deterioration and self-destruction. This family member, who had once been so vibrant and full of life, was now fading, their light dimmed by the overwhelming darkness of their struggle. Ron recalled specific late-night conversations with Cheryl, their voices hushed, the weight of the situation pressing down on them both as they lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what else they could possibly do. He remembered seeing photographs of his loved one from that period, the stark difference in their eyes, the hollowed-out look that spoke volumes of their suffering. Ron found himself trapped in an impossible bind, a cruel dichotomy that pitted his professional destiny against his most profound personal loyalties. On one side stood the gleaming edifice of his directorial ambition, the chance to sculpt a cinematic masterpiece, to etch his name even more indelibly into the annals of film history. On the other, the crumbling structure of a loved one's life, teetering on the edge of complete collapse, crying out for his immediate presence, his unwavering support, his direct intervention. The studio was pressing for a decision, eager to greenlight the project and begin pre-production. The family, particularly Cheryl, was urging him to prioritize the immediate needs of his loved one, emphasizing that this was a crisis demanding his full attention, not just a passing concern. He felt the immense pressure from both sides, a tearing sensation within him. How could he walk away from the biggest opportunity of his career? How could he, conversely, turn his back on someone he loved so deeply, someone who was quite literally fighting for their life? He spent countless hours agonizing over the choice. He paced his office late into the night, the weighty screenplay open on his desk, its pages reflecting the glow of his desk lamp. While his mind raced through all the potential scenarios, all the tragic what-ifs. He tried to rationalize, to convince himself that he could manage both. Perhaps he could commit to the film, delegate care, fly back and forth, make it work somehow. He told himself that his success, his continued career ascent, would ultimately provide greater resources, greater stability for his family in the long run. He remembered the feeling of responsibility, not just to the studio, but to the hundreds of crew members who would depend on this project for their livelihoods. He felt a profound sense of obligation to seize this moment, this fleeting window of opportunity that might never open again. But every time he tried to convince himself, the image of his struggling family member would flash into his mind. Their pain palpable even from a distance, a stark reminder of the human cost involved. He could almost hear their weakened voice, a silent plea cutting through the Hollywood noise. Ultimately, under the immense pressure of the moment, with studio executives waiting and the sheer momentum of his burgeoning career pushing him forward, Ron made the devastating choice. He committed to the film. He signed the contracts, shook the hands, and plunged headfirst into the all-consuming vortex of pre-production. He convinced himself that he was doing the right thing, or at least the only thing he could do at that juncture. He believed he could compartmentalize, that he could dedicate himself to the monumental task of directing while simultaneously monitoring and supporting his family member from afar. He established what he thought were robust support systems, arranging for professional care and relying heavily on the strength and dedication of other family members, including Cheryl, to be on the ground. He believed he was making a difficult but necessary strategic decision, one that would secure his family's future even as he navigated a present crisis. He remembers the cold, metallic taste of certainty mixed with a bitter undercurrent of unease as he made that final handshake. The immediate aftermath was a stark and brutal illustration of his miscalculation. Professionally, the film was an undeniable triumph. Production was challenging, demanding every ounce of his skill and energy, but the dailies were promising. The buzz around the project grew with each passing week. Critics praised its scope and ambition, and when it finally premiered, it garnered significant accolades, securing his position at the very pinnacle of Hollywood directors. He was lauded, celebrated, and his name was once again synonymous with quality and success. The awards began to pile up, statuettes gleaming on his mantelpiece, each one a testament to his talent and hard work. He stood on stages, accepting honors, smiling for the cameras, projecting the image of a man in complete control, basking in the glow of his achievements. But behind that public facade of triumph, a different, far more agonizing narrative was unfolding in his private life. While he was meticulously crafting scenes on set, making decisions that impacted hundreds of people, the phone calls from home continued, each one a fresh stab of fear and despair. The family member's addiction spiraled out of control with terrifying speed. The interventions he had hoped would be sufficient proved inadequate. The support systems he had put in place strained and buckled under the weight of the crisis. He vividly recalls a specific evening, late in the production schedule, when his phone rang with news that turned his blood to ice. His family member had suffered a severe overdose, collapsing in a state so critical that they were rushed to the emergency room, their life hanging by the thinnest of threads. The doctors were uncertain if they would make it through the night. Ron, standing on a bustling soundstage, surrounded by the controlled chaos of filmmaking, felt the ground give way beneath him. The contrast was horrifying. One moment, he was meticulously adjusting a camera angle for a pivotal dramatic scene. The next, he was receiving news that his loved one was fighting for their very last breath. He remembered the sterile, echoing sound of the hospital corridor during that desperate phone call, the stark white walls a painful visual counterpoint to the vibrant, colorful world he was creating on screen. The missing months the video description references were not a period of physical absence, but an internal void, a chasm that opened between his external success and his internal devastation. He was present on set, directing with his usual focus and calm, yet his mind was miles away, consumed by a gnawing fear and a profound sense of helplessness and guilt. He felt an overwhelming sense of disconnect, a chilling realization that while he was winning awards and garnering praise, he was simultaneously almost losing one of the most important people in his life. The joy of professional success was utterly eclipsed by the terror and sorrow of this personal catastrophe. The family member miraculously survived that harrowing ordeal, a testament to medical intervention and a sliver of stubborn resilience. But the event left an indelible scar, a deep, raw wound that would take years, even decades, to begin to heal. The immediate aftermath was fraught with pain and recrimination. The relationship with his loved one, already strained by the addiction, was further fractured by what they perceived as abandonment, a prioritization of career over their desperate need. Other family members, while understanding the pressures of his work, also wrestled with a quiet resentment, a silent questioning of his choices. He felt the chill of their disappointment, the unspoken judgment that weighed heavily on his conscience. The dynamic around the family table shifted, a subtle but palpable tension now present, a reminder of the price paid for his professional ascent. In the years that followed, this agonizing choice of 1991 became a persistent source of regret and introspection for Ron Howard. It wasn't a wound that ever fully closed. Rather, it became a part of him, a constant, low thrum beneath the surface of his otherwise exemplary life. Every award he accepted, every standing ovation he received was tinged with the memory of those desperate phone calls and the image of his loved one fighting for their life. He often found himself replaying the moments leading up to his decision, wondering what would have happened if he had chosen differently, if he had walked away from the film, if he had simply been there. The question of what if became a quiet, relentless tormentor, a shadow that never quite dissipated, even in the brightest spotlight. This profound experience irrevocably influenced his perspectives and decisions for decades thereafter. It reshaped his understanding of ambition, success, and the true meaning of personal fulfillment. He became more acutely aware of the delicate balance between professional drive and personal responsibility, learning a hard lesson about the true cost of unchecked aspiration. He became fiercely protective of his family time, making conscious choices to limit his work commitments, to be more present for his children, his wife, and even for the very family member he had almost lost. He sought out projects that allowed for more flexibility, or he ensured that he built in significant personal time around demanding schedules. He dedicated himself more quietly, and perhaps more intensely, to supporting his loved one's recovery, understanding that true healing was a long, arduous journey, requiring unwavering presence and compassion. The enduring weight of that life-altering decision permeated his being. It made him a more empathetic director, perhaps even a more thoughtful man. He often spoke in hushed tones during recent interviews about the profound lessons learned from that period, acknowledging the heavy toll his ambition had nearly exacted on his personal life. He revealed that the experience fundamentally altered his internal compass, recalibrating his priorities away from purely professional accolades towards a deeper appreciation for the fragility and paramount importance of human connection. That devastating choice from 1991 wasn't just a moment in time. It was a crucible that forged a different Ron Howard, a man forever marked by the understanding that some triumphs carry a price too steep to ever truly pay, a quiet reminder that even the most perfect smiles can conceal the deepest scars. Imagine the world watching Ron Howard in the mid-1990s and early 2000s. He was a man seemingly on top of the world, navigating Hollywood's most challenging waters with an almost impossible grace. His directorial star was shining brighter than ever, with a string of critically acclaimed and commercially successful films. The public saw the steady hand, the thoughtful gaze, the smile that radiated quiet competence. They saw the triumphs, the awards, the standing ovations. But beneath that polished surface, behind the scenes of every red carpet event and every celebratory wrap party, Ron Howard was reportedly waging a silent, deeply personal war. While the world celebrated his genius, he was fighting to keep a close family member from succumbing to the ravages of addiction. This period, often remembered as a golden age for Howard's career, was simultaneously a crucible of immense emotional strain for him and his immediate family. It was an agonizing juxtaposition, the dazzling spotlight of professional achievement contrasting starkly with the dark, isolating shadow of a loved one's struggle. Let's trace this timeline, marking the very moments when the world applauded his brilliance, all while Ron himself was reportedly grappling with a profound sense of helplessness and fear, the kind that gnaws at a person's soul. The early 1990s marked a significant pivot for Ron Howard. After years of establishing himself as a reliable director with hits like Splash and Parenthood, he was now tackling bigger, more ambitious projects. In 1991, for instance, a decision was made, a choice that, according to Howard's later reflections, would haunt him for decades. This was reportedly the very year when the insidious grip of addiction tightened its hold on a person deeply cherished by him. While specific details about this family member and the exact nature of their struggle have been kept largely private out of respect for their privacy, Howard has, in carefully worded interviews, alluded to the overwhelming burden and the devastating choices that such circumstances demand from a family. It wasn't just a challenge, it was an active crisis, unfolding at the very moment his professional life began to accelerate into overdrive. Then came Apollo 13 in 1995. This film was a monumental achievement, a masterclass in tension and storytelling that captivated audiences worldwide. It wasn't just a box office smash. It garnered 9 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and brought home 2 Oscars. Ron Howard, the former child star, had definitively proven himself as a director of historical epics, capable of crafting thrilling, emotionally resonant narratives from real-life events. The press lauded him, critics showered him with praise, and Hollywood welcomed him into its upper echelons. Imagine the glow of those nights, the applause ringing in his ears, the feeling of universal acclaim. Yet, behind the scenes, there were reportedly frantic phone calls, whispered conversations, and the constant, crushing weight of worry about his family members' precarious health and future. The joy of professional success must have been profoundly complicated by the gnawing anxiety that, at any moment, the other shoe could drop, shattering his private world. The challenge of supporting a loved one through addiction is often described as an emotional marathon, full of sprints of hope followed by crushing falls into despair. For Ron Howard, this marathon was reportedly run in the public eye, albeit with a hidden lane. Every interview where he spoke about the craft of filmmaking, every press conference celebrating another milestone, was reportedly punctuated by the silent knowledge of a battle being fought far away from the cameras. He was there for the premieres, smiling for the cameras, answering questions about special effects and historical accuracy, all while perhaps mentally rehearsing conversations about recovery programs or worrying about a relapse. This duality, this constant emotional tightrope walk, is something Howard has only begun to touch upon in his later years, revealing the profound loneliness of carrying such a secret burden. Consider the sheer emotional labor involved. Addiction, as many families can attest, is a relentless disease that does not respect schedules or professional obligations. It demands constant attention, endless patience, and an incredible amount of resilience. Howard, a man known for his calm demeanor and meticulous planning on set, was reportedly confronted with an unpredictable, chaotic force within his own family. His efforts to provide support would have stretched far beyond mere financial assistance. It would have involved navigating the complex, often frustrating landscape of treatment options, therapy sessions, and potentially interventions. It meant being a rock, a confidant, an enforcer of boundaries, and a source of unwavering love, often all at once, and sometimes within the span of a single day. The fear of losing this dear family member was a persistent, chilling companion, reportedly shadowing his every move and muting the vibrancy of his professional successes. The phrase "almost lost" from the video description underscores the very real life-and-death stakes involved. Following Apollo 13, Howard continued his impressive run. Films like Ransom in 1996, a gripping thriller, and Ed TV in 1999, a prescient satire about reality television, further cemented his reputation as a versatile and commercially viable director. Each project brought new accolades, new opportunities, and new demands on his time and energy. Yet the private struggle continued to simmer, often boiling over into moments of acute crisis. The immense pressure of a Hollywood director's life, the long hours, the constant travel, the relentless pressure to perform and deliver, would have been amplified by the hidden anguish. How do you prepare to shoot a complex scene involving hundreds of extras and intricate camera movements when your mind is preoccupied with whether a loved one is safe, whether they've relapsed, or whether they're even alive? This is the invisible weight Ron Howard reportedly carried. The year 2001 brought Ron Howard his most significant professional triumph to date, A Beautiful Mind. This biographical drama, telling the story of mathematician John Nash and his battle with schizophrenia, was a critical darling and a massive box office hit. It swept the Academy Awards, winning 4 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director for Ron Howard. The moment he walked onto the stage to accept his Oscar, his face beaming with pride and gratitude, was a career-defining peak. It was the culmination of decades of hard work, talent, and perseverance. But as he stood there, holding that golden statue, expressing his heartfelt thanks, one can only imagine the complex tapestry of emotions swirling within him. The profound joy of that moment, undoubtedly earned, was reportedly intertwined with the enduring, often unspoken pain of his family's private struggle. He was literally at the pinnacle of his profession, while simultaneously navigating the emotional depths of a personal crisis that few knew about. According to those close to him, or at least to the guarded revelations he has made over the years, the decision to keep this family struggle intensely private was multifaceted. There was, first and foremost, the desire to protect the dignity and privacy of his family member. Addiction carries a heavy stigma, and Ron Howard, ever the protector, would have wanted to shield them from public judgment and scrutiny. Then there was the pressure of his own image. The all-American boy from Mayberry, the wholesome, dependable director, that persona didn't easily accommodate the narrative of profound personal turmoil and the messy realities of addiction within his inner circle. To reveal such a struggle might have been perceived, perhaps unfairly, as a crack in the carefully constructed facade of perfection, a vulnerability that he felt compelled to keep hidden, both for his family's sake and, perhaps, for his career's sake in a less understanding era. The emotional toll of this prolonged secret battle was reportedly immense. Howard, a man known for his equanimity, must have experienced flashes of frustration, moments of despair, and deep-seated fears that few would have witnessed. The chronic stress of watching someone you love self-destruct and feeling powerless to completely stop it can erode a person's spirit. It can lead to sleepless nights, distracted days, and a constant undercurrent of anxiety, even in moments of great joy. This kind of personal anguish can be profoundly isolating, forcing the individual to compartmentalize their life to an almost unsustainable degree. He was a devoted husband to Cheryl and a loving father to his children, and reportedly, he worked tirelessly to ensure that this private pain did not completely overshadow their lives, adding another layer of complex emotional management to his already demanding existence. The journey with addiction is rarely a straight line. It is often characterized by cycles of recovery and relapse. The description notes that he almost lost this family member, suggesting a period where the situation became acutely life-threatening, pushing Howard and his family to their absolute limits. It would have been during such harrowing periods that the devastating choice from 1991, or similar difficult decisions in later years, would have taken on even greater weight. Perhaps it was an intervention that required tough love, a decision to cut off certain support, or a choice to prioritize the well-being of the broader family unit when a loved one was spiraling. These choices, made under duress and with profound emotional consequence, are the ones that reportedly continued to haunt Ron Howard, even after the immediate crisis had passed. Ultimately, while the exact outcome of this specific family member's journey with addiction remains a private matter, Ron Howard's decision to later speak, however generally, about this painful period is a testament to the enduring impact it had on him. It reshaped his understanding of success, vulnerability, and the true meaning of family. It underscored that beneath the glittering surface of Hollywood success, even the most seemingly perfect lives are often touched by profound human struggles. The awards on his mantelpiece stand as monuments to his professional triumphs. But the anguish he reportedly carried in his heart during those very years forged a deeper, more resilient man. A man who knows intimately the cost of ambition and the immeasurable value of unconditional love, even in its most challenging forms. The relentless pace, a treadmill of creativity and crushing responsibility, had been grinding Ron Howard down for years. It wasn't just the long hours or the intricate logistics of feature film production. It was the quiet, persistent hum of personal anxieties that amplified every professional stressor. He had carried the weight of that devastating choice he made in 1991, a decision that had repercussions echoing through his family life, even as he was lauded for his directorial prowess. The unspoken fear for a loved one battling an addiction that threatened to unravel everything gnawed at him constantly, a secret burden he bore with stoic resolve. Each award ceremony, each triumphant premiere felt like a performance, a carefully constructed facade to hide the raw edges of his personal struggles. He was running on fumes, sustained by sheer force of will and a deeply ingrained work ethic that told him to always push harder, always do more. The specific project he was immersed in at that time, a demanding period piece with sprawling sets and complex character arcs, epitomized the high stakes of his career. The air on set, typically charged with creative energy and focused ambition, began to feel oppressive, thick with unspoken pressure. Day after day blurred into weeks, then months, marked by pre-dawn calls and late-night wrap-ups. He'd arrive home, often after midnight, only to be consumed by script notes, casting decisions, and the endless minutiae that fell squarely on his shoulders. Sleep became a luxury, often interrupted by intrusive thoughts or the sudden jarring realization of another problem to solve. He'd started to notice a pervasive dull ache behind his eyes, a persistent thrum in his temples that no amount of coffee or sheer willpower could silence. His usually boundless energy, the trademark enthusiasm that endeared him to crews, was waning, replaced by a weary efficiency. Crew members, used to his affable nature, might have observed a subtle shift, a quietness, a slightly slower pace in his step. But in the whirlwind of filmmaking, such observations were often fleeting, easily dismissed as the natural toll of a particularly tough shoot. The morning it happened, the set was buzzing with the controlled chaos of a critical scene. They were shooting on location, a remote, dusty area miles from the nearest town, recreating a pivotal historical moment. The sun beat down relentlessly, baking the earth and shimmering off the period costumes worn by hundreds of extras. Ron had been up since 3 a.m., reviewing storyboards, making last-minute adjustments to a complex crane shot. By midday, under the blazing sun, he was conducting a series of takes, each one requiring intense focus, meticulously adjusting actors' positions, checking camera angles, ensuring every detail contributed to the historical accuracy and emotional resonance he strived for. He remembered feeling an odd, disorienting lightness, a sensation not unlike being underwater, where sounds were muffled and movements felt strangely delayed. He'd ignored it, pushing through, convinced it was just dehydration or a passing fatigue. He was leaning into the monitor, scrutinizing a playback, when the world around him began to spin with dizzying speed. One moment, he was giving a nuanced direction to a lead actor, his voice calm and steady, despite the burgeoning darkness around the edges of his vision. The next, a blinding white flash obliterated everything. He felt a profound lurch, like the ground had suddenly given way beneath his feet. The last thing he consciously registered was the jarring sound of his own voice, attempting to articulate a command, dissolving into a guttural gasp. Then, a sudden, sharp impact, a jolt that reverberated through his entire body as he hit the hard-packed earth of the set. Chaos erupted around him. Crew members, who had been focused on their tasks, suddenly stopped, a hush falling over the hundreds of people present. Assistants rushed forward, their faces etched with alarm, calling his name. Someone shouted for a medic. The frantic scramble, the immediate concern in their voices, broke through the ringing in his ears, pulling him back from the precipice of unconsciousness, but only just. He was vaguely aware of hands on him, gentle but firm, rolling him onto his side, checking his pulse. A cool cloth was pressed to his forehead, and the scent of antiseptic wafted through the air. The bright, merciless sun seemed to pierce through his eyelids, even though they were closed. The world was a jumble of muffled sounds and fleeting sensations, the grit of dust under his cheek, the worried murmurings of his team, the rising heat of panic. The immediate aftermath was a blur of concerned faces, hushed conversations, and the insistent beeping of medical equipment. He was quickly moved from the dusty set, shielded from the view of the hundreds of extras, and transported to the nearest medical facility, a small, unassuming clinic far from the glitz of Hollywood. The diagnosis, delivered by a kind but grave-faced doctor, was unambiguous. Severe exhaustion, dangerously elevated stress levels, and a body pushed well beyond its natural limits. It was, the doctor explained with a quiet intensity, a complete physical and mental collapse, a stark warning sign that his system had simply shut down in protest. There was no single dramatic medical event, like a heart attack or stroke. It was the cumulative, insidious erosion of his physical and psychological reserves. He was ordered to stop work immediately, to enter a period of absolute rest and recovery. The doctor's words were unequivocal. Continue this path, and the consequences could be far more severe, irreversible. Back on set, the news rippled through the crew, a mixture of shock and quiet understanding. Production was halted, a monumental and incredibly expensive decision, but an unavoidable one. The official statement released to the press was carefully worded, citing unforeseen health complications requiring immediate rest and a temporary hiatus in filming. It was vague enough to satisfy the initial media inquiries without revealing the true gravity of what had transpired. Publicly, Ron Howard was fine, just a temporary setback. Privately, he was a man teetering on the edge, forced to confront the wreckage of his own relentless drive. The missing months began then, a period shrouded in a carefully constructed veil of privacy, away from the prying eyes of the industry and the public. His loyal team worked diligently to manage the press, to deflect questions, to maintain the illusion of a smooth, if slightly delayed, production schedule. The world believed he was simply recuperating from a minor illness, perhaps catching up on sleep. They had no idea of the profound, often painful journey he was actually embarking upon. Ron's confession about what really happened during those missing months laid bare the raw truth behind the public facade. He wasn't just resting, he was unraveling, then slowly, painstakingly putting himself back together. He spent weeks in almost complete isolation, at a remote, undisclosed location, away from the constant demands of his career and the noise of Hollywood. The initial days were marked by a profound emptiness, a deep, pervasive fatigue that felt less like physical tiredness and more like a soul weariness. He slept for hours on end, waking disoriented, the lines between dreams and reality blurred. He remembered feeling utterly lost without the structure of his daily work, without a script to analyze or a crew to lead. For a man whose identity had been so deeply intertwined with his profession since childhood, this forced cessation of activity felt like a loss of self. There were moments of fear, a terrifying uncertainty about whether he would ever truly regain his footing, whether the creative spark that had always driven him had been extinguished by burnout. But as the days slowly transformed into weeks, a different kind of clarity began to emerge from the haze of exhaustion. Stripped of the relentless schedule, the urgent deadlines, and the constant pressure to perform, he began to see his life and his choices through a new lens. He walked for miles each day, not with a destination in mind, but simply to feel the earth beneath his feet, to breathe clean air, to observe the slow, unhurried rhythm of nature. He read books that had nothing to do with filmmaking, listened to music he hadn't had time for in years, and allowed his mind to wander without the need to immediately solve a problem or craft a narrative. He engaged in long, honest conversations, not with industry peers or collaborators, but with a therapist, exploring the underlying anxieties and the deep-seated need for control that had fueled his unsustainable pace. He confronted the hidden demons he had been outrunning for so long. The quiet guilt over the choices he'd made, the gnawing worry for his family member, the impossible standards he'd set for himself. It was during these quiet, reflective moments that he truly understood the immense toll those burdens had taken, not just on his mind, but on his physical body. The collapse on set wasn't an isolated incident. It was the dramatic culmination of years of silently carrying too much. This period of forced introspection became a crucible, forging a new understanding of his own limitations and vulnerabilities. He realized that the relentless pursuit of perfection, while admirable in intent, had become self-destructive in practice. He learned the vital importance of boundaries, not just with others, but with himself. He began to understand that true strength wasn't about enduring endless pressure, but about acknowledging when it was time to step back, to heal, to seek help. He reconnected with the simpler joys of life, the quiet moments with his family that he had often sacrificed at the altar of his career. He called it his recalibration, a time when he had to completely dismantle his old patterns of behavior and reconstruct a healthier, more sustainable approach to living and working. It was a painful process, an ego-shattering experience for a man who had always prided himself on his resilience and unwavering commitment. But it was also profoundly liberating, allowing him to shed the invisible chains of expectation he had placed upon himself. He discovered a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper appreciation for his craft, but tempered with a newfound respect for his own well-being. When Ron Howard eventually returned to the director's chair months later, he was the same brilliant storyteller, but a different man beneath the surface. A man who had faced his breaking point and emerged with a profound, hard-won wisdom about the true cost of chasing perfection at all costs. After half a century of carefully curated public appearances, of consistent critical and commercial success, Ron Howard has finally pulled back the curtain on the immense pressures and hidden pains that truly shaped his journey. He revealed the agonizing decision he made back in 1991, a choice that reportedly haunted him for decades, alongside the terrifying ordeal of nearly losing a beloved family member to the brutal grip of addiction, all while he stood on stages accepting accolades. And then there was the moment his own body, pushed beyond its limits, simply gave out on a demanding set. These aren't just isolated incidents, they are deeply intertwined threads that form a stark contrast to the often envisioned image of the perpetually cheerful, all-American boy from Mayberry. What we've witnessed is a profound act of courage. For a man who built an entire career on a foundation of wholesome likability and unwavering professionalism, opening up about such intensely personal struggles, about the darkness that sometimes hid behind that familiar smile, is nothing short of extraordinary. It shatters the notion of the perfect Hollywood icon and replaces it with the infinitely more compelling reality of a complex, resilient, and profoundly human individual. His honesty, after so many years, carries an immense weight, not only for him, but for us, the audience, who have followed his story for generations. This isn't merely a celebrity confession. It's a powerful reminder that behind every public persona, no matter how bright, there often lie unseen battles. Ron Howard's willingness to confront his past, to speak openly about his vulnerabilities, and the devastating choices he once felt compelled to make, reshapes his legacy entirely. He moves beyond the archetype of the flawless visionary and steps into the light as a man who faced his demons, who navigated immense personal heartache while simultaneously delivering cinematic masterpieces. This raw vulnerability offers invaluable lessons about the relentless pursuit of dreams, the sacrifices made along the way, and the enduring strength found in admitting our imperfections. It cultivates a deep sense of empathy, allowing us to connect with him not just as a filmmaker, but as a fellow human being grappling with the universal complexities of life, love, and loss. His journey reminds us that true strength isn't about avoiding struggle, it's about enduring it, learning from it, and eventually finding the courage to share the truth of it all. It's a testament to the fact that even the most seemingly idyllic lives contain their own shadows. What do you think about Ron Howard's revelations, and how do they change your perception of him? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive insightful, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more exclusive content.